Welcome to Better, the podcast about doing better, being better, and leaving the world a better place than we found it. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Better. I'm Jay, your host. Do better, be better, make the world a better place. That is our motto. So sometimes, actually, before I talk about the guest, I'm going to say it at the top end instead of the back end, like I normally do. If you like the guest today, or if you like any of the guests, or if you like any of my solo episodes, or if we've done anything that has in any way made your life a little bit better, please like, subscribe, share, rate, all that fun stuff. Now, as you guys know, once I got out of the hospital, I've been trying to think of where I want this podcast to go. And really my main focus is that I want to make sure that each episode people leave feeling like either A, they can totally conquer what the problems are in their life because the guest that they have just watched conquered way worse conditions, or B, that you're going through something similar and somebody came through it on the other side, and that allows you to as well think that you can do better. Guest today, she sent me basically her life story. And Aleasha has one of those stories that I have zero frame of reference for where to start, what target to hit, that sort of thing, because there's so many aspects and moving parts to her story. So what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce her to you in a second, and then I'm going to get her to say in her own words kind of a quick overview of what she's been through in her life. And then we're going to jump into a couple of particular topics over the next 2 episodes. And then I'm sure we're going to have her back to go over even more. That's how big this story is. So without further ado, Aleasha, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm good.
Don't forget to just eat that mic a little bit, make sure it's nice and close to your mouth. So like I said, big story here. You've been through everything and then some. What kind of, in a really short overview from where you want to start, let's say childhood, all the way up to today, what is the quick overview of what you've been through, your story?
Yes. So basically, I was born to 2 addicted and alcoholic parents. I was in foster care, in and out. I grew up in a small town, moved to the city, where I was introduced to drugs and the sex trade, which led me to my entire 20s being in and out of recovery. I eventually ended up homeless, living on East Hastings, and I managed to get a diploma and a career. So that's what I've been doing with my life now.
Okay. So, and then there's a lot of nuance in there, that I think people are going to, if you've been through something similar, you're definitely you're gonna feel these next couple episodes. But if you haven't been through something similar, you're definitely going to be grateful for the fact that you didn't have to go through all this. So I would like to maybe let's start with the sex trade.
Yes.
Can we start there?
Sure.
So by sex trade, you mean basically prostitution? Is that what we're talking about? Okay. Is there any nuances to that classification, or is it pretty much the same? Like you accepted money for sex? Is that?
Yes.
Okay. So I am personally of the thought that decriminalizing prostitution would be a beneficial thing because it brings out the shadows and allows women that are in that situation, whether they want to be or not, proper medical care without shame, those sorts of things. But what drove the decision to get into that for you?
Yes. So I wasn't even a year out of foster care. I got into a relationship with someone. It was very abusive. We broke up and I was completely on my own.
And you were how old at this point?
I was 18.
Okay.
So I was very naive. I had only been in the city about a year and a half at this point, and I was looking at newspapers. There were these ads for escorts, and my understanding was that they were just dates. And I was like, oh, I'll go on dates for money. Like, and then my half sister was like, why don't you call my best friend? She knows of a place you can go to. So I called her best friend, and she told me there's a place just up the street where you can do massages, and they'll hire you right away because you're pretty. So I was like, okay, like, why not? So I took a walk down. I called them, asked if they were hiring. They said, yes, come down. So I went in, and they hired me on the spot. And I remember when I walked in, it was such a luxurious, beautiful establishment. And I was sitting there filling out the form, and I was like, there's no way they're going to hire me. Like, this place is too classy. It's too high end. And they took me in for training, and they told me everything that I had to do. They were like, you're going to have to wear a bathing suit, have your makeup done. And you take the guy to the hot tub, then you take them on the massage table, and then you have your clock with you. The last 7 minutes, you're going to give them either a hand job or a blow job. And my jaw dropped. And I was like, I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah.
And she's like, you're going to make tons of money. She's like, you're going to have so much fun. She's like, just try it for 1 week. If you don't like it, you don't have to come back. And I was like, I don't know. I'll think about it. And I was so like enamored by how beautiful the building was and how nice everything was. So I went back, and I made money I've never seen before. So that kept me going back, which eventually led to escorting, where I put up advertisements on websites because I could never keep that job. I was too messed up on drugs and drunk. I'd pass out in the staff room, and like I'd always get complaints from the clients. Like, I never got any regulars because the whole time I'd be in the session with someone, I would be cringing. Like, I never wanted to do it, and they could tell. I never had any repeat clients because I had such a bad attitude. I didn't want to be there. I just cared about the money to supply my drugs and alcohol.
And it probably honestly made them feel shitty about what they were doing because they knew you didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
And like, I can just imagine being in a relationship with someone who doesn't want to be there, how bad that would be. But then in this situation, like, you're actually, in a way, you probably scared some of these guys straight simply by being like, I'm victimizing someone, because people can detach themselves from creating victims a lot. I find, my one motto in life generally is don't create victims intentionally. But people come up with all these crazy, weird ways that they go, well, I'm not creating a victim. I'm, yes, she's giving me a blowjob for money, but I'm funding her drug habit, so I'm doing something good for her, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's how people come up with stuff in their brain. But okay, so you're doing this thing, you're not able to hold on to it because of drugs and being messed up and all these things, and then you get into escorting, which is different than prostitution. Yes, escorting is, the way it's explained to me is, you've got hooker, which is basically Maine and Jarvis kind of style, and then you've got prostitute, which is like a little step up, where you're like you're accepting a little bit more money. You're not like going to people that are spending like $5, and then you go to escort, and then escort being like the top echelon of clientele. Am I right about that, or is that?
I did meet some guys that paid a lot of money. But yeah, it's just, you just put up an ad with pictures not showing your face and your prices, and you either go see them or they come see you if you have a place.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you find that, did you ever do like so we held the Halloween event on Jarvis years ago, and there was some prostitutes came up and were making us offers for like $5, things like that, right? And we're like, I honestly just gave him money, and I was like, I don't even need the services. Like, I just want you to not have to blow a guy today. You know what I mean? So were you ever in that area of it, or were you always kind of in this where you put up the ad and there's a little bit more, is there a little more protection? Is there?
No, there's not extra protection at all, because they're coming to your home or you're going to their home. And I was always by myself. So
how did you do that without being absolutely terrified for your life?
I could never do it sober. I was always drunk or on pills.
Okay.
Yeah, I could never do it sober. I just couldn't. So I didn't care. Like, the drugs were just more important.
Right. So you were so firmly into your addiction that your personal safety didn't even count into it because all you cared about was getting to that next high.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was my only source of income. Like I could never hold a job. I had many like fast food jobs, serving jobs. I would get fired or not show up for being hungover. Like I couldn't go to those jobs under the influence.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So it was like torture. Like being sober was torture. It was just so uncomfortable. I would do anything to not be sober. So having a job was just unmanageable. I couldn't.
Right. So, so you're basically doing escorting to feed your addiction, and the addiction came from where? Do you believe your addiction came genetically, or did your addiction come from, kind of living a life where drugs were readily available? Because I know people that are all different kinds of journeys in drugs, right? I know some women that got addicted to drugs because the males in their life just made it readily available to them, and it made it easier for the males in their life to have sex with them. And that was kind of how it went. I know people that got addicted to drugs because their parents were addicted to drugs, and they just had that yearning even when they were like children.
Yeah.
So where did your addiction come from, do you think?
Well, when I lived with my dad after we got out of CFS, when we would get sick, he would feed us his Tylenol 3s. At age 11, I realized that when I took these Tylenol 3s, I would feel warm and fuzzy and euphoric and confidence. I wasn't scared to talk to my peers. So I started stealing them in grade 6 to go to school because I was finally not self-conscious. I could like pass notes to guys that I liked in my class. I just didn't care when I was on the Tylenol 3s, and that started at 11.
At 11?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how does it evolve from there?
Well, I hit puberty, and I started hanging out with friends that had older brothers that would have parties, and we got into the alcohol. I was 15. So I started drinking at 15, and I never really tried drugs. But when I moved back to the city, I was hanging out with people. I would go to parties people had drugs and would offer them to me. And that's how I got into them.
We're talking, okay. Sorry, I'm trying to get to the nuances of it. So Are we talking people that offered you drugs as a way to be able to, or were they, how do I put this? There are some people that offer drugs and say, I just want people to have a good time with me. And then there are other people that offer drugs so they can get something out of people. Did you find, because you're hanging out with now older guys, right?
Yeah.
Do you find that the drugs were kind of a gateway for them to be able to do whatever they wanted, or was it just them trying to? It just allowed you to be more a part of the party?
I think it was just to be more part of the party. I met these girls at a party, and we became best friends. And they used to hang out with these Spanish Bloods, like the gang, and they sold ecstasy. And that's where I first got into the drugs, like party drugs anyway, before I got into like the pills and the crack and the meth and all that.
Yeah.
So that's where it started. And that's where it ruined my life right from the beginning. Got me in trouble right from the beginning. So it was just at first going to parties and them handing it out. But then I would also buy from them after I got addicted. So who knows, maybe they knew I would become addicted and become a customer.
Right. Yeah. That's a pretty popular thing.
Yeah.
Did you see in your mind a big so when I was really young, my cousin had me drink a 40 of Old English. Okay. Remember, like that horse piss beer,
yes,
you know?
I remember that.
And so I was like, oh God, I don't know. I think I was 12 maybe. And a few years later, trying to be cool, fitting in with a group of people, they were all older. I'm like 14, 15, and they're all 20, 25, 30, right? And I'm trying to get into this industry which was the club industry. And somebody gave me a 40 of tequila. And I drank that like I drank the 40 of Old English. So I almost died from alcohol poisoning, right? But because my brain, I was too immature to understand the difference between a 40 of Old English and a 40 of tequila. Did your brain compute the difference between that euphoric feeling from T3s and ecstasy? Like, did it just feel like drugs are drugs? at that point, or did you understand the difference between them? Or
I didn't, honestly. When I was at that age, 11, I didn't understand I was getting high.
yeah,
I didn't realize that, but I knew that when I took that ecstasy and alcohol, like I knew that I found the answer to everything.
right, yeah,
like
or at
it
least you
just,
thought so.
I
Yeah,
thought it
you
was
thought
my
so.
solution to everything
Yeah.
that I was going through. It was like the solution to making friends, to feeling better, to feeling confident, to connecting with people. I've never had that, like with other people. Like me and my sister were really close, but yeah, drugs and alcohol made me feel they made me feel connected with other people. I felt okay in my own skin. Like everything that I was worrying about was just gone. Like I was just in the moment. I was present.
And given the way your life had been up to that point, I'm guessing reality wasn't all that appealing to you.
No.
So that already led you to a lot of self-confidence issues and everything. So then once you get on drugs, and now all of a sudden it's like unicorns and rainbows everywhere,
Exactly.
right? So it's
Yes.
like, why would you not want to be high?
Exactly. Yeah.
Man, like I said, it's like a million different directions to go in with this. um I don't know if you can even answer this. And if you don't want to answer it, just say I'm not really comfortable with answering that question. You're high, you're an escort, you're with these guys you don't even know, they're just calling you out of the blue, hey, I want to pay you to have sex with you. What are guys like in that scenario? I know you can't really paint with a general brush, but like, for example, I can never see myself doing it. I can never see I know people that have done it. But when I thought about it, like I remember I met this escort in the lobby of my building one time. She was a very attractive girl. And she was I went up in the elevator. I came down like half an hour later. She was still there. I'm like, are you looking? Like, I was wondering what was going on. And she's like, oh, I'm waiting for somebody to come home. And I was like, oh, like, I was like, we've been waiting here for like half an hour. And she's like, yeah, he's late, whatever. But he's on the clock, so it's fine. I was like, he's on the clock. And she was very open. She's like, yeah, I'm an escort. I'm here to have sex with this guy. And I was like, and she told me who he was. And I was like, you should run. Like, I've met this guy. You should run. And she didn't. And I don't know what ended up happening, to be honest. But in my head, it's never even been an option for me to pay for sex. However, and I don't demonize people for doing it. I know there's many reasons why guys do it. Widowed, don't want to get emotionally invested with someone. But of the guys that you ended up with, you're high, you're having sex with them. What were guys like? Like, is it awkward? Is it like, how was it?
So when I was drunk and high, nothing felt awkward. It was always like just business. I can honestly say a lot of my clients that I seen were really respectful.
That's good.
And generous and kind. If there was someone that was gross, like if they didn't shower or if they were cheap or rude, I wouldn't see them again.
Okay.
So I was glad to at least have that control. Whereas at the rub and tug I was at, like, we couldn't say no to anyone. And we had to endure sitting with them for however long time they booked. So I was really lucky that I never had any bad dates. And they were all just like,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's saying something.
It's a blessing.
Never would in a million years would have guessed that would have been your answer.
Yeah.
So I guess you said something that's kind of interesting to me. It's just business.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find that through this whole thing, like dealing with drug dealers that were, they're getting you high and then they're getting you hooked and then they're selling you drugs, men from the rub and tug and then the rub and tug owners and the men through escort and prostitution? Is it like business? Is it honestly like everybody understands you're there for transaction, you're there just to do, there's a job here to do? It's normalized. It's like, is it just a normal, it really is, hey?
Yeah, it's like some of them described it as like a hobby. Like it was what they did as a hobby, what they did for fun. And it was just always just, they knew what to do. We knew what to do. It was never more than that. I never had any that caught feelings. It was just, they just wanted someone for an hour to spend time with and hook up with. And that was it.
See, when you frame it like that, except for the whole drugs and all these, you being young and all these sorts of things, it almost does seem like it's just business. It's just something, somebody's providing a service, somebody wants the service, and that's it. But it's obviously not healthy.
No.
In any way, shape, or form. What what was your mental health? What were your thoughts like going through this stage in your life? So let's go from like the rub and tug up into being an escort.
Mhm.
What was your mind like through this whole time? What did you think? What was your relationship like with yourself?
I didn't care. I didn't care about myself. What was the most harmful, I think, were people finding out and bullying me for it. Like someone found my ad one time and posted it on the dirty.com. You remember that website?
Oh, do I ever? Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. My dad seen it. People from
Oh,
my small town, apparently my grandma seen it. Like it was a big talk in the small town, but what I ended up becoming.
of course.
Yeah. And that was probably the most shameful part about it. But I just, like I said, my life revolved around getting high. I did what I had to do to get high and to provide for myself because I didn't have anyone. Like I had nobody to go to.
So, we're talking about your family a bit. When your family found out all this and you said shameful, did they shame you for it or did they try to support you and try to get you out of it? Like, how did that go?
My dad was so mad. So I was still very naive to because like I thought I didn't know what a rub and tug was. I figured no one else did. So when I told my dad about this new job I got, I told him the massages and the bathing suits. I was like really excited about it because it was like so new to me and like the money was crazy. He knew right away. All he said was, "Can I say the F word?"
Yeah.
He said, "Fuck you" in capital letters and blocked me.
What?
Yeah. And I remember thinking, "Oh my God, how does he know?" Like, and then a couple years later, like he did unblock me, but he sent me the link to the dirty.com of my post on it, and he said, "Who did this? Who posted this?" And I said, "I don't know." Like
that was the problem with that site. Anybody could post anything about anybody they wanted.
Yeah.
I know. I was posting there 12 times. I ran nightclubs, right?
Yeah.
So everybody just assumed that I was a shitty human being.
Yeah.
See, that to me, so digging into family now, your father blocks you when he finds out you're working at Rub and Tug. To me, that's a moment where your dad should have stepped up and been a dad and said, honey, we really need to figure out why you're doing this and how to get you out of it because this is not okay. If you're older, you're more emotionally mature, and you decide this is a path to go in your life, okay, maybe. But under the circumstances, I'm sure your dad knew you were under. Not stepping up to be a father in that moment, it was probably a very defining thing for you. Has that been a theme throughout your life where just you didn't have people stepping up to have your back, and that kind of caused you to continue to decline?
Yeah. I had nobody teach me it was wrong. Like my mom did it, my older sister did it, my auntie did it.
We're talking drugs or prostitution?
Prostitution.
Oh.
Yeah.
So it's like a family business almost.
Yeah, but my older mom, my older sister and my mom actually walked the streets, and my auntie, like they didn't do the escort thing. They would actually just walk up and down Ellis. So I figured like my mom actually let me use her apartment a few times and got me a couple guys to see and everything. And so like it was, like I said, I never had role models. So I didn't know there was a better way to live. I didn't.
Right.
Like, it was normal to me.
I've told this story on this podcast before, but it bears repeating. When you grow up, I grew up in various levels of, we'll call it privilege, right? Sometimes I fought for what I had to eat, and then sometimes I ate great. You know what I mean? And my life has been, kind of like whatever I could make of it. But I've never wanted for the basics, we'll say. Okay. So the basics were always available to me. My parents always made sure of that. I went to Sloan Mission one time, and they were just launching their like medical facility there. And this guy got glasses. This homeless guy got glasses, and he broke down. Like the guy broke down crying. He thought up until that moment that everybody saw the world he did, which was blurry, can't really make out shapes. He's just going through, like, he was in his, I think they said late 30s. So he lived his whole life without vision, but he didn't know any better. right? Because nobody explained to him. He was in and out of addictions and bad homes and things like that, right? So then he's able to see, and all of a sudden it changed his life.
Wow.
Right. So now it's like, oh, there's a reason why I was like this and why people considered me dumb and all these things. And it just all came down to vision. Right. So people might be sitting there right now because we live in a very judgmental time.
We do.
Right.
I know.
People might be sitting there going, well, how could she not know? You know, how could she not know this wasn't healthy or this is a bad situation or whatever? But if your family business is prostitution, drugs have been in your family the entire time, and there's other circumstances that you had in your childhood, how would you know?
Yeah.
You know, I'm lucky the parents I got. You know, my dad isn't Bill Gates and my mom isn't Julia Roberts, and I you know, I grew up that entitled, but my parents were your regular, average, everyday people. I didn't have to deal with these sorts of things, right? The only thing that I learned from my childhood when it came to drugs and addiction was I didn't want to drink alcohol because all my dad's friends had beer bellies and I didn't want a beer belly. That was really the extent of it, right? So if I look at your story, my story, I'm like, wow, am I privileged here? Like this is crazy. So your family is structured around this negative life. Your life becomes about this negative life. You can't really see a way out because you don't even know what the other side looks like. So this is your way out, essentially. At what year, like when we met, were you in this life?
I was getting out of it
at that time.
Yeah.
Okay. So what drove that? The getting out of it. What was the better moment, we'll say?
Yeah. So I had to hit rock bottom before I wanted to change. I had lost my apartment. I had broke up with my boyfriend. I lost my job at that rub and tug. So I had nowhere to go. I was wandering Osborne, totally hammered, and I was gonna jump off the bridge. And my mom called 911, and the ambulance came, and they took me to the doctor. And I remember laying on the doctor's table there, the examination table, and I was just crying, like, I can't stop drinking. I can't, like, I've tried so many times to stop. I can't stop drinking. I'm losing everything. And they got me into detox and then rehab. And unfortunately, the first time I went, I didn't stay sober. But around the time we met, I had been in and out of recovery for about a couple years. So it's a long story. I had overdosed on Tylenol 3s.
Okay.
I turned yellow. My eyes and skin were yellow. I was so weak I couldn't sit up in the hospital bed.
Back to the OG drug at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was very resentful that I couldn't get high anymore because the doctor said, like, if you so much as smoke a cigarette or take a Tylenol, that could damage your liver even more. So you can't take anything.
Were you jaundiced? Is that where you're yellow? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was the most painful thing I've ever gone through. Like, my liver was fried.
Right.
Yeah. So about 2 months into recovering from that, I started feeling better. I started, like, noticing the birds chirping in the mornings. I really enjoyed the sunshine. I could feel the showers. Like, when I'd have a shower, I felt it. Music sounded amazing. I was able to eat. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna stick to this sober life. So I went to a 12-step group. They welcomed me with open arms, and I went every day. And I got a house with my sister and our best friend. And it was the best year of my life. Like, I got a career DJing. I was working minimum wage jobs and kept them. And I paid my bills legitimately. And it was the first time in my life I had my own place that I was paying for through hard work, and with my sister and my best friend. And it was just a really fun year. Like, it was the best year of my life. I still remember it. Like,
so it was almost like you replaced an unhealthy addiction with a healthy addiction, which is real life, right?
Yes.
Kind of.
Yeah. No, it was my first time being sober since I was like 11. So, yeah, I wish I could say I stayed sober, but I seemed to have a pattern of hanging out with old friends that were still using and getting into bad relationships. That's what always led me back out.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those old friends are a hard habit to break. And you kind of like fall into this pattern of attraction to people, and then it's really hard to break that pattern.
It is. Yeah.
So how many times did you kind of fall off the wagon and get back, and when's the last time you fell off?
So I've been in about 10 different treatment centers since I was 19. Recovery houses, and the nature of addiction is it's progressive and fatal. There's no cure for it.
Right.
So every relapse gets worse and worse. I had to hit bottom over and over again. Each one got worse and worse. This last one ended up with me as a missing persons on East Hastings. That was a crazy experience, and it brings me like it hurts a lot when I remember those days.
For anybody who doesn't know, East Hastings in BC, in Vancouver, is, I mean, probably one of the scariest environments a person could find themselves in. It's I remember the first time I saw it, I thought to myself, how in the hell is it possible this exists in Canada? We preach so much about other countries and how they live and all these things. And then you go to East Hastings and you're like, oh, wait, we're doing the exact same thing, if not worse in some regards, because of the fact that 2 blocks away, there's all these rich people with all these resources.
Yeah.
And you don't cross that threshold.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember I ended up having to stay in a hotel in East Hastings. I didn't know any better because that was my first time being in Vancouver. And I got, and the toilet was the shower, was the sink. And I remember I pulled back the sheets on the bed and I was like, I could hear the bed, that's how many bed bugs were in it. You could hear them moving. There was like probably millions of them, right?
Gosh.
So I went, I slept in my vehicle. And I remember I got up in the morning, and mornings are usually for me a rejuvenating time. You get a little bit of vitamin D, you kind of stretch it out, you kind of enjoy the moment. And I found I couldn't, because nobody else could that was around me, right? Because they're in this horrible situation. So I just want to give some context to people. East Hastings is hell on earth, essentially. And you were there. So this is your last time hitting rock bottom. So just, sorry, continue. I just want to give them context.
Yeah, for sure. So I went out to BC this past summer. That's where my sister died. She died in BC, in Vancouver. And I went out there after a bad breakup with my most recent ex. And I was like, I'm just going to go out there and die with my sister. Like, I've tried getting sober so many times. I'm too messed up. Like, there's no hope for someone like me. Like, I'm alone in this world. Like, all I had was my sister. Like, everything that I went through in my life, my sister was by my side. We have the exact same story. Like, we shared a room till we were adults. We were roommates as adults. Like, we were together all the time. Like, you could never see us without each other. Like, if one of us would be by themselves, they'd always ask, oh, where's your sister?
You guys look similar, right?
Not really.
No? I'm trying to remember who. I think I met her once or twice.
Yeah, she was in the clubs a lot too.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, continue.
So after she died, it was very, very difficult. I was alone for the first time in my life. So after trying and failing to get sober, I was just done. I was like, I'm just going to let the drugs take me. I don't care. But I didn't go to East Hastings on purpose. What happened was I went out to BC to do sex work. I got kicked out on the second day because she found my needles and drugs. It was in this beautiful mansion. It was like this crazy mansion. I was there one summer and I made 10 grand in 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I went back there to make money and I got kicked out right away. I met up with a friend. He took me downtown to get drugs. I had already had drugs on me. He left me. And I just went wandering around Vancouver downtown by myself, just shooting up in the back lanes and everything. And my phone got stolen by these guys I was getting high with. So I had no phone. Nobody knew where I was. I had eventually ran out of money. And I ended up on East Hastings, and I didn't sleep for the entire almost 3 weeks I was there. I didn't eat. I was date raped twice. And it's actually crazy how I got out of there. So I have a half sister that I've only met a couple times. Because she grew up in BC, she was in a psych ward at the time. She heard about my missing persons report. So she hopped the fence at the psych ward, took a ferry to the mainland, to Vancouver. She found me in 1 day.
Wow.
On the streets of East Hastings. Yeah, she found me in 1 day. And
Jesus.
yeah,
Okay.
and she was like, "You're coming back to the hospital with me. Like, you're gonna die." So I was like, "Okay, whatever." And I just remember that strut. We walked like through the city, and I remember the whole time I'm picking at the ground because I was like a flailer. Like, I couldn't help but look at the ground, and she kept getting annoyed at me. And she took me on a ferry, and we went to Nanaimo. And we got off the ferry, and for literally like 10, 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes after we got off the ferry, the cops picked us up because she was now a missing persons because she escaped the psych ward.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And then I was too, and they found us right away.
Okay.
And they took us back to the hospital. I had to get a minor surgery on my stomach because I hadn't eaten in like 3 weeks, and my stomach, they basically described it as it was collapsing on itself, and it only happens to really skinny people.
Right.
And I was so sick. Like, I was incredibly sick. I thought I was going to die. But they fixed it. And yeah, that was my journey back into recovery. I was on welfare out there, actually. I got on welfare, and I used my welfare income to pay for a plane ticket to go back to Winnipeg. And my plan wasn't to go back to treatment or anything. I was like, I'm just going to smoke weed and go back to work. But my doctor asked me if I would want a bed at rehab. And I said, you know what? Why not? Like, I'm so skinny. I'm not eating well. I'm still smoking pot like crazy. I would like to come off pot because that became an addiction too. And yeah, that was my last time in rehab. And I was really scared. I was scared of failing. I was scared of facing myself. I was scared of living without my sister. I was scared of women. I was scared of men. I was scared of being judged. I was like, okay, so I'm going to get sober and I'm going to be miserable and lonely. I was like, but it's still better than how I was living.
So that mindset changed now.
Yeah.
Because before the drugs were better, now the drugs aren't better.
Yeah.
So now you're turning a corner. That's a very clear change in perspective.
Yes.
Okay.
I was like, I don't care how miserable and lonely I am. It's better than being homeless, wandering around back lanes and having seizures constantly, and nobody wanted to be around me, not even other addicts. Like,
right.
People would walk past me on the streets. I would try to talk to them. They didn't want anything to do with me. Like, they would just take one look at me and just not respond. Because, like, I did try asking for help a couple times on East Hastings. Like, where am I? I came out of, like, when I was drugged. I didn't know where I was, and nobody would stop and talk to me and I'd ask for help. Nobody.
Well, we discard people so easily in this society, right? Because it's like the consensus I find in general amongst people that have what the have-nots don't is, well, I was able to do it. Why can't they? And, you know, I hope to, and we're going to have to jump into part 2 soon. And don't worry, guys, the story does have a happy ending, and we'll get to it in part 2. But, you know, I think that where that comes from is people not understanding. So there's this great movie, this great football movie, and this basically what they do is they line up all these students on a line on the field, and the coach says, if you had both parents in your life, in your home, take a step forward. If you didn't witness your family doing drugs, take a step forward. If you, and all these things, right? And then at the end of it, you could see the clear disparagement maybe between the people that had it was if you didn't have all these negative things, take a step forward. So you could see so many people are at like the 50-yard line, and you're like, okay, now we're going to start the race, and some people are still back in the end zone, right? So they do the race. Obviously, the people at the 50-yard line are going to win, right? No matter how fast the person is in the end zone, they're going to lose. So I find that a lot of these discussions, they're about, well, I didn't get addicted to drugs, so they shouldn't have been able to get addicted to drugs either, which means I'm better. They suck. I have no time for them.
Yeah.
Let's move forward. But you started in the end zone, if not further into the rafters behind the end zone, because you didn't just go one day, oh, I want to do ecstasy, and then you went down this path. Your genetics, your environment, everything was stacked against you. So what I would like in episode 1, part 1 of this, for people to take from this is you listen to this story, and I hope each one of you is like, oh, that end zone reference, that football field reference holds true in your head, because you didn't have 2 stable parents in the house. You did witness drugs. Your mom and other family members were in prostitution. Your dad did not step up when he should have. Your friends were a disaster. We witnessed people dying around you that you loved. You had all these things stacked against you. That isn't a fair start in life, and that's not a fair ride in life, right? And I know some people be like, well, once she was sentient, once she was able to like mature and have a brain, she should have been like, well, this is stupid. But that's also, and it comes back. There's a podcast I did earlier today, and we were talking about transgender, about kids that think they're a different sex. We're talking about how you can't really, none of us can have a say in that debate because we don't understand it at all, right? So to help you guys understand this, imagine your life as you have it right now was her life. Would you still be where you are today? And would you still have, would you have at any point in time made a good decision based on everything you've heard? I don't think you would have. I know I wouldn't have, and so that's where I want to leave part 1 is with this, and for you guys to think about that. Okay. Because next week you're going to see part 2, or if it's already come out, you're going to see part 2 right away. But just think about that for a second. Whenever you see somebody in the street, I have to deal with it here. We're downtown Winnipeg.
Yeah.
I've been stabbed in the foot trying to, wake up a homeless person to move out of the way of my door. I've gotten in numerous fights with people trying to steal stuff, and like all that, I see the meth. As much as everybody wants to say the meth crisis in Winnipeg isn't a crisis anymore, it very much is a crisis still. And sometimes in the moment when they're trying to steal my shit, I'm like, I lose that perspective.
Yes.
But for the most part, I think to myself, what was the story before this moment? And if you're one of those people that can't contextualize this topic, I hope you can now, and just take a moment, think about it, ruminate on it, think about whether if you had these circumstances, you would be where you are today. And hopefully it leads you to be more empathetic and leads you to do better in regards to how you think about these things and how you deal with these things. So we're going to go on part 1, and then we'll come back into part 2. And I know you got lots of stuff here that you want to talk about. So we're going to get in a lot more to that. And we have to end this off with people knowing how you did better and where your life is at today. So that's everything for part 1. And guys, make sure you tune into part 2. All right. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for checking out Better. If you got to the end, it must mean you liked the episode, right? So how about 5 stars, maybe a sub, maybe a share, great universal comment points, and good luck on your better journey.